Well, hey friends, Alain Picard here. It's so good to see you and to connect with you for this live stream Q&A session here in the Painterly Landscape course. And really, we are moving right along in wonderful, exciting ways. I'm checking you out over here in the chat. I have to kind of turn my head over to see the chat today, but wonderful to see you and to be encouraged by your presence today. Thanks for joining us. And I just shout out so many of you. Hi to Lois, who got into that chat super early, and Birnbaum, who's sharpening pastels while she waits. Hey, Cindy from Virginia, and Nancy, great to see you. Hey, Lois, of course. Patty Ann from Southern California is here. And hey, Kathy from Auckland. Friends, it's great to see you. Here we are enjoying our milestone 5 this past week. Of course, that means that you will be engaging in content in the Painterly Landscape course anywhere from milestones 1 through 5, and we're thrilled for any stage in the journey that you may find yourself in right now. Remember, go at your own pace, enjoy this experience. The most important thing is that you engage your creative process and that you keep moving forward. Wherever you may find yourself, that's the key. So I love that we can be at different stages, different milestones, and be celebrating one another. So it's been really great. For instance, I was in the group enjoying your exercises that you're posting and sharing from all the different milestones, from organizing your pastels and showing off those wonderful painterly spheres to thumbnail exercises and color studies, as well as now our underpaintings. And certainly as we are in the underpaintings, I'm excited for you, but before I say anything about underpaintings, I just want to say, remember, you may not have posted or shared your work. This could be your day, this could be your week where you're going to post and share an exercise. And please, no matter what it is, we are so thrilled that you will be engaging and contributing. I also just really want to encourage you, friends, to make comments on others' work. It's so wonderful when we can support and encourage one another and provide that feedback. When people are saying feedback welcome, we want to be able to encourage and support one another by bringing that feedback. So remember to post on 3 and then share for me. That means show up in the Facebook community, post on 3 different people's work and give them some meaningful feedback, and then share your own, inviting that as well. So that makes a really powerful world-class community. We love to see that happen. We're all learning together, and that's what's really important. So many of us come from different experiences, different mediums, different stages, watercolor, acrylic, oil, colored pencil, different things, right? And some of us are beginners in general to art making. And so we want to be able to create space for all of us and just be able to support each other along the way. We're learning together, and know that as you learn new things, it is uncomfortable. It does take time, even just stroke pressure with soft pastel. It takes time to develop a sense for how much pressure to use when we're applying strokes, okay? That's just a great example of one. But I do want to know, here in milestone 5, as we splish splash our way into some underpainting fun, right? Activating the scene with dynamic color in all sorts of ways. What was your takeaway from milestone 5? If you have one, if you've been working on the milestone 5 underpainting exercises, perhaps you had a discovery, an aha, or a little insight or key takeaway. I'd love to know, friends, so do let us know in the chat. And as you do, I just want to shout out Gil from Keene, and Christy from Illinois, and Judith, so good to see you. Hey, Susan from Ontario. And you had Thanksgiving in Canada, didn't you, friends? It always occurs to me that we have in North America, the Thanksgiving is a unique phenomenon for the Americas, and in Canada you have one earlier, right? So that's wonderful as well. Cynthia, great to see you, and Mary from Ohio. And Deborah says, love the variety of underpaintings, so fun. That's great. Deb said, violet underpainting. Yes, I like that a lot. Yeah. Well, you don't have to twist my arm to love some violet. I really, really love it as well. So as you continue to answer your takeaways from milestone 5, I just want to say a few things to you. Now, excuse me, pardon me. Activating your scene with underpaintings is really fun. It's something that I thoroughly enjoy, and it really builds upon the color concepts that we've been learning as we move through milestone 4. And I really hope that you gain further insight into what's possible now as you're utilizing different wash approaches, you're trying different methods, but we really want to make this our own. And at first, you're just here to experiment, try the different techniques. Some of them may not be for you. You may find a certain solvent is not your thing, like you might not like the mineral spirit, or you might not like the alcohol, or whatever the case may be. You may be really excited as a watercolor painter to try watercolor underpaintings, right? That's wonderful. We want you to be able to explore these different approaches and then ultimately make them your own. I'm seeing a lot of questions as well about like a monochrome underpainting. Isn't that just a toned paper? And that makes you all very perceptive. Of course, someone toned that colored paper with a monochromatic underpainting, but they did it in the factory, right, in the shop. So yeah, so an orange paper is an orange toned monochrome, isn't it? But what's special about underpaintings is that you have an opportunity to create it yourself, to key the color exactly how you want, also to create some excitement, like washy, interesting textures and evidence of the brush and different transitional or transparent effects that you won't see in a flat toned paper. That can be really, really exciting as well. So continue to open your mind to what's possible. I'm sure you'll find certain underpainting techniques that really get you excited and that you want to use more, and that's fantastic. So I'm over here checking. Trudy said, I was so pleased with the monochromatic underpainting in a pale pink. That's so exciting. I'm thrilled for you, Trudy. Veronica said, don't cover all the underpainting. I used to cover it all with watercolor, but with pastel, it counts to leave some visible. Yes, I'm telling you, when we cover all the underpainting, we definitely lose some of the magic and the beauty and the joy of that transparency that is not possible with the dry sticks, right? And that is so fantastic, so great. Jean said, win, loving the bright colors. That's a good takeaway, we love that. Julie said, doing the underpainting in local colors and painting with the alcohol was fun. Yeah, so that alcohol creates more viscosity and keeps the edges open longer, doesn't it? In a really wonderful way. So for those of you who are oil painters or you have Gamsol or some sort of mineral spirit in your studio, it's like, oh yeah, let's use that. That's great. So really fun. Keep those coming and enjoy the chat today as we talk and as we ask questions. I want you to be engaging and sharing your insights and ideas as well, okay? Well, friends, SG Penn says, the underpainting gives me a nice structure to start a painting. Julie says, I'm finding new ways to use yellow. Loriana says, being an artist is about being an inventor. Oh, that's so good. Yes, creative problem solving. That is the artistic way, isn't it? So fantastic, friends. I love all of your insights, your takeaways. Keep them coming. What I'd love to do now is really just jump in and enjoy the wins that you have experienced this week. Thank you for posting and sharing wins inside the community. Love to read your wins and to celebrate them here with one another as we break through together, okay? Of course, every time we try a new thing, we do the exercise, we step out into a new exercise and experience, we try a new material, it's a win, it's a breakthrough. I want you to see things that way because when you're stepping out, you're learning, always learning. Even if you don't love the result, even if you didn't feel comfortable, you are making progress, and it is so very powerful. I'm sure you're discovering that now as we have done a number of different color studies and kind of moved into whole different dimensions of kind of understanding how all of this starts to fit together from a color standpoint, and definitely are growing some familiarity, hopefully, with the materials as well. So what we're gonna do now is jump into your win. So drum roll, please. I'm actually gonna use this little festive experience. I'm throwing some festive into the air here in the chat, and you guys can keep it up as well because we're going in on the wins. Ready? Let's do it. Leslie on the left said, this was an amazing milestone. I learned a lot about underpaintings and the color wheel. My win is that now I would rather have another box of more pastels than a box of chocolates. Who knew that pastel colors applied correctly could look so delicious? That's awesome. Mary, win, experimenting with constrained color ranges and seeing what can happen. Seeing how the varying size of the marks and color areas contributes to variety and structure. Sometimes minimizing busyness is valuable. I love that. Winnie said, I am learning the value of doing the same painting more than once. Each attempt allows me to refine my composition, try out different marks, and nudges myself out of my comfort zone with colors. That's wonderful, Winnie. Beth says, loved doing this study, found that the underpainting really enhances the colors and helps to provide a great map for painting the composition. Yes, Beth, that's wisdom there. Amy says, practice makes painterly. My first attempt looks like a kindergartner. Took some crayons to paper, but I didn't give up and took what I learned, and my second attempt was so much better. I love it, I love it, I love it. That's great, Amy. Keep going. Another slide. Kathy on the left. Win, my marks are getting less fussy. Maybe it's still a bit busy, but when he says big and bold, the big is better on average. Less fiddly in my hands, at least. That's great, Kathy. I love hearing that your marks are getting less fussy and that you're making those big, bold marks. That's fantastic. Keep going. Cindy said, I realized my win is the fact that as I sketched, I found myself referring to my thumbnail more and more than the reference. Awesome. That's great, Cindy. You follow that thumbnail design. Delise, the win was how joyful it is to use color in unexpected ways. Oh yes, that's fantastic. Lily said, win, it was a challenging project for me, but I enjoyed the process. Oh, that's a good attitude, Lily. Jillian said, win, following the process with thumbnails and value study really has helped me instead of just jumping on right in. Are you feeling the winds, my friends? Are you feeling the winds of change just blowing over this beautiful riverside tree scene in our lives, right? We're loving that experience and it's really fun. Way to go, friends. I love when we share these wins, we get to share some, a nice little peek of some of your paintings and exercises. It's so exciting. You're doing fantastic. And what we'll do right now is just jump in to a handful of examples of your milestone 5 exercises in underpainting, which is really, really thrilling. Of course, here are mine, right, with our complementary underpainting and the local color wash. And, in one sense, there's a lot of similarities, but you can so feel the orange underneath with that local color. With that color, I'm going to use my words really well right now. With that complementary orange underpainting, yes, it's wonderful. And then the local color is just really fun. I love actually local color underpaintings for sky scenes because of the gradations and the wet edges you can get and clouds. The transitional atmosphere you can get is really wonderful, okay? So awesome stuff. What I'd love to do here is jump in, let's take another look and celebrate some milestone 5 activity. So here we have Lily on the top left and Linda, and then we've got, I'm just jumping up here with the pen, we've got Linda, and then we've got Anne on the right. And what's fun about these is you get to see all kinds of approaches to the underpaintings. Of course, I encourage you to do 4 unique underpaintings, from the monochrome to the tonal value map to the complementary and the local color underpainting. So we can see all this excitement. And isn't it amazing how each and every one has a different feel and environment to it, right? Like it just feels different. So I love seeing the mood and how color shifts mood. And as you use underpainting washes, the edge manipulation and the relationships of color shifts mood, right? We've seen that here with Linda using, I love Linda, you put the little tape and you identified each, right? Complementary and cool with pink alcohol, local color, mono, and then cool mineral spirit. So lots of fun. I love seeing that. It's really neat that you kind of probably got bored of doing the same composition there, Linda, and you did that vertical, really fun there. And Anne on the right, actually what you're seeing here is these are the underpaintings, and then these are what was created on top. So it's really interesting to see, like with a flat orange monochromatic complement, we get that kind of result. With the blues in a tonal map, we get this result. With the complementary, we get this result, and then with the local color, this result. And so you can see there's a lot of room to manipulate as you go to the pastels and you work on top. And the reality is, friends, if we cover everything, you know, we're just using the underpainting as a launching off point that gets buried underneath our pigments. And it can still look really beautiful, but it is wonderful to learn more and more and more how to build that bridge of, you know, seeing the piece, seeing the transparency, seeing the wash, seeing the underpainting in the mix of the finished work, okay? Fantastic, super exciting here. Here's another set of slides by Pat Farr, who did 4 unique pieces in a very broken color foliage look. And then Dagmar here on the bottom has done 2. You can see that, you can just feel that orange popping through with that complementary orange, and then the local, I suspect, on the left. We've got Kirk on the right, and again, this is Kirk's underpaintings, and then how Kirk layered pastel over the top of those underpaintings as well, okay? So, and friends, I love seeing the experimentation, the activity. Look at the exciting underpainting color here, this hot red and yellow, and then we see that pushing through. I think it's really exciting when we let that hot color push through. We see that with the orange here. Let it sparkle through in the work. Let the viewer experience that warmth pushing through from underneath. It works really, really, really well. Great job, my friends. So exciting. Now, remember, these are color studies. These are not finished works. These are small pieces. We're exploring ideas. So imagine what's possible as we begin to go bigger, right? Like, I want to really, in particular, call out the local color underpainting. It's harder to do any nuancing at that small color study stage. So now, as you get to scale up and you work larger with these underpainting approaches, I think you'll discover, in particular, the local color, you'll have more room to nuance edges and transitions when you work larger, which can be really, really exciting, okay? Great job. Keep going. What was your favorite underpainting technique? Let me know in the chat. What was your favorite? Was it the complementary? Was it the local color? Was it that monochromatic tonal value map where you could kind of use the same color and change the mapping of those values? What was it for you? What really stood out? What did you really enjoy in that process? What was your favorite? Deb says local color. Julie, complementary. Linda, complementary. Chris, monochromatic. Isn't that neat? Out of 4 people, 3 different favorites. That's what I love to see. Francis, local. Kathy, complementary. Patty Ann, loved the watercolor local color. I want to say this to all of you watercolorists right now. You've got to try Lux Archival paper. It's a very good quality. It's like 100% cotton rag. So it isn't the least expensive paper. It's more expensive. But if you're a watercolor artist who's enjoying pastel, you owe it to yourself to try Lux Archival paper. It's a sanded paper like UArt, but it's white. So it's not like a buff off-white. And it's just the way that the watercolor in particular blooms on it. You still have the sanded or the coating, the toothiness for pastel, but the watercolor looks really beautiful on it. And then you can build that bridge between really creating the watercolor elements and those glorious fine art pigments. Lots of complementaries, a little run on complementary here. Yeah, not surprising. I mean, complementary is probably one of my favorites. For me, I have a favorite for different types of approaches. Like if I'm trying to give that color pop, I'll go to the complement. If I'm trying to create that washy, wet atmosphere, I'll go to the local color. If I'm trying to create that sort of intensity of value, I'll do a monochrome and really set the mood. So it just really depends, but I love seeing that. Way to go, friends. Okay, we're gonna get into your questions right now. Thanks for sending them in. Lots to cover, so I wanna get going on this and make sure that we're able to enjoy. Just making sure I got everything here. Yeah, enjoy answering all of your questions. Yes, let's do it. Remember, questions are sent in on Monday for the Tuesday Q&A. Thank you so much for sending your questions in a day before. That is so very, very helpful. Gotta wet the palate. Linda, hi Linda. I have a box of Sennelier Paris collection. When I buy a box When I buy a box, I like to use the reference pages from Dakota to fill out which colors they are. But why does the box not reference which colors are in the box, and how can I match them? Okay, Linda. So I have not recently purchased my own set of Paris 120 pastels. Do they print the numbers on the box, like on the back of the box, the front of the box, or the inside of the box? That would be my guess if you didn't have a paper in there of any kind, that somewhere in there on the box is a code. But fear not, because our good friends at Dakota Pastels will give you a wonderful means by which you can discover the numbers. Because Dakota actually, if you go to Dakota's website and you look up this set, you can find it. Actually, let me see if I can figure this out. So I'm going to show you my computer for a moment and bring this up. Give me just a sec. You can see this is Dakota, and let me try to go full screen with it. Ooh, I can do it. Yes. So this is actually the Paris set at Dakota, and you can see they've coded the sticks. But they even go beyond that, and they have, if you go click here for set contents, I believe they go to the listing of all the colors, okay? Which is crazy and awesome. So definitely check that out. The Sennelier 120 Paris half stick set. Looks like they got a nice little sale going on it anyway. But that is a beautiful thing. So I don't know what Sennelier is doing with their box, if they've hidden their codes, or if they, I just have a feeling they're either on the back of the box printed, or they're somewhere. But if not, you can use the help that our good friends at Dakota have given, okay? Okay, hold on just a moment, friends. Everything good? Okay, sorry. Allison has a question. Hi, Allison. Do you recommend taking out the harder pastels from your palette, such as Rembrandt or new pastels, and keeping them separate? Or do you mix them in with your softer pastels? I started with Rembrandt at a teacher's recommendation, so I have a lot of them in different hues, taking up room in my Dakota box. But I don't necessarily have those same colors duplicated in soft pastels, but I feel like maybe I should. So I don't like to put my hard pastels or the medium Rembrandts in with my soft in my palette. I keep them separate because the medium in particular, like a Rembrandt, I find that they're so different in density that when I pick up one of those Rembrandts thinking that I'm gonna have a soft pastel, like a Sennelier or a Terry Ludwig, any of these softer brands, even Unison, even though that's a medium soft, it works much better than the Rembrandt in conjunction. So I remove all of those, and then I keep my hard pastels in their own little collection. And when I go out plein air, I just bring a little set of the hard pastels separate from my palette. Absolutely. That's how I do it. I started off putting them in, and I found myself quite frustrated when I was grabbing a color thinking it was soft and it was harder, okay? So, and the hard pastels, they're not as fragile anyway, neither are the Rembrandts, so you can kind of package them if you're taking them with you anywhere. You can put them in different little containers that are a little less, you don't need to put them in your Dakota box to keep them super protected, okay? Winnie, hi Winnie. Any concern with light fastness when choosing brands of pastels? Will a pastel painting hanging in a room fade over time? Great question. And of course, friends, as I'm answering these, please give me your answers in the chat. Give each other, actually, I should say. And I think it's really helpful when we share these insights and ideas with one another. So, first off, what I want to say to you here is, yes, there is a concern of light fastness with certain brands. Like I bought a set of Holbeins years ago, and the set was open, and one side of the Holbein pastel sticks was a little lighter, and I flipped it over and it was darker. And that's UV light, like fading it over a few years. So there's nothing to worry about with the high quality soft pastels with respect to the quality of the pigments. There is a quality difference in pigments themselves. So even within a really high quality brand, there might be a color that is more vulnerable to fading over time. That is why they will star them. Like Schminke, for instance, has different stars with each of their pigments, and that star system, rating system, will let you know how light fast it is. And because if they have to make the color from some earth pigments, those may fade faster than something else, okay? So the chemically created colors nowadays, the modern science colors, they're very, very light fast. Anyway, so you want to look at that. I think that NuPastels, Prismacolor NuPastels, there may be certain colors within there that are more vulnerable, but I don't build up a lot with the NuPastels. I don't try to do a whole painting. I tend to sketch and then layer the soft over. I've never had an issue with fading, and I think largely the light fastness is very good. There may be, again, colors that have a lot more like of the white into it. That's less pigment, right? So I would watch out for like just the really inexpensive stuff. There's a reason why it's not expensive. They're putting tons of fillers and binders and less pigment in, okay? Now to the point of like, will a pastel fade over time? If you've ever gone to a museum, you'll notice often if there's a Degas exhibit of pastels, that's in a dark room. And that's because works on paper and the pastels on paper, even watercolors, they are vulnerable to UV light. All art is vulnerable to UV light. Oil paintings are vulnerable. They just have art conservators that paint over them. So yes, UV light does affect even the best of paintings and pigments. So we don't want to put direct sunlight on our paintings, okay? So, nothing to be worried about, but ultraviolet light will fade all pigments, not just, but the highly light fast pigments will fade slower. So we don't want to put them in direct sunlight, okay? I remember going and seeing a Degas exhibit at the Met, and it was like a really dark room at the Clark Museum in Massachusetts as well. Really dark room, and I was like, ooh, wow. They were protecting those pastels. Sue, hi Sue. My question is, do you think it is beneficial to have a selection of square as well as round soft pastels? I'm aware as I do the different exercises and watch the videos that most of my pastels are round. Just a few very dark Terry Ludwig. It seems that more interesting marks can be achieved with the square pastels. Okay, so square versus round. Now here's the deal, friends. If I bring you down to my palette, you can see here, actually this is my landscape set. This is the Terry Ludwig landscape set that is on my website. I don't know if I showed it to you or not, but it's really pretty, and of course it's square. These are the colors. But as you see down here, I was doing a painting yesterday of a pumpkin. And of course, there's tons of pastels down here. You don't need this many pastels for a pumpkin. However, some are round, some are square, others are round, others are funny shapes. And honestly, it doesn't really matter. They all make great marks. Now, of course, when the Terry Ludwig square ones, here's a TL that I've broken, of course, right? It's shorter than the full stick. I like those kind of broken pieces. They're easy to make those choppy marks with, but here's a round pastel, and at that size, it's easy to make a nice choppy mark with it because edge to edge, you're gonna get some beautiful marks. You know, there's all kinds of funky little shapes and sizes. There's probably a Unison or something. Round pastel. I love Schminkas for how soft they are. Here's some of those glorious Schminka Extra Soft whites. You can't get any better than the Schminka Extra Soft creamy yellows and whites. I'm sorry, they're just fantastic. There's another one. You can make gorgeous choppy marks with these. I think having them broken into these manageable sizes is one of the ways that, you know, they make a nice clean mark. They really do. So I want even you to see, here's a Terry Ludwig actually. This is interesting. I've just used it a lot. It's not square anymore. It's a kind of round because I've used it so much that now it has a round shape. But every time I use it, I can make those really exciting marks. And I just wanted you guys to see I put some pinks and lavenders into this landscape set because I'm in love with them. But there's some gorgeous turquoises. This is one of my favorite turquoise colors that's in the set. And you can see those on my website, the T010 and the T340. Those two turquoises. A lot of times people ask me about them. I love those. They're just so pretty. Some really pretty ultramarines. And then of course, some hot red to gold and some earthy greens into those limey yellows, but some fun stuff, a little bit more cool neutrals, and that is a powerful cobalt and deep navy. So really fun stuff. If anybody's interested in a Terry Ludwig set, we do have a handful of those still available in the store, okay? All right, so that's my take on the square versus round because like, I know it feels like you have to have the square ones, and there's no doubt, like when you get a brand new square stick, it's just really fun and really easy. Sorry, friends, I'm trying to get a piece of paper towel. I've got like pastel all over my fingers. It's just really easy to make a nice crisp mark, but it's not necessary. Like I've been making gorgeous choppy marks with Schminkas and Senneliers and Unisons for years upon years upon years. I do really enjoy the square format. I'm not hiding my affection for it. It's lovely. And there's so many brands now that are coming out with them in that format, which is fun. But it all works. Okay. Cynthia, hi Cynthia. And of course, friends, as we talk about this, like what's your favorite format? Like, do you like the square versus the round? You know, the reason why I often suggest the Paris set and these Sennelier half stick sets is they are just such a, I mean, you are getting a good value soft pastel, extra soft pastel. And you're getting it at a great price. Like we know, you know, some of these brands of soft pastels, especially if it's a larger stick, you're getting a lot of pigment. They cost a lot of money. So it's really wonderful to have opportunities to get into a good quality soft pastel and have a lot of colors available at an affordable price, right? So that's the whole point there. Cynthia, I have been using Sennelier soft pastels along with Jack Richardson and Unison, and the Sennelier seem to become softer with time and use. They fill the tooth even with light pressure. Is this common? I know to apply the softest pastels in the later stages, but it still seems like to like smear on more than the others. Comments, please. Thanks so much. Yeah. Okay. So just to, Cynthia, thanks for that question. And I get it. Like what's interesting about the half stick Senneliers is they tend to have a little kind of a waxy coating on them when they come. So when you rub them, that first mark or two, sometimes you're just rubbing off this kind of little bit of a coating. That's not the case with all the colors, but with certain ones, I find that happens. And then it's just like nice and creamy. I haven't experienced that it got creamier and creamier over time. I'm wondering whether like you just rubbed off that outer surface and then you got the normal creaminess of the soft pastel. And you do have to manage that extra soft pastel by not overusing it. And you're right, like all things created equal, the same pressure stroke. If you use that stick and a Unison, the Sennelier is gonna put more pigment on and it's gonna be mushier, okay? It's gonna be creamier. It has a really wonderful role to play in that extra soft range. Now that's why some of the harder and firmer pastels are also useful, because they're not so creamy and so mushy, right? So you can work both sides of that. When you initially just get, your first set of softs, and you've got those, and you've got maybe a few hard pastels, you might want something in the middle, right? That's where that density of firmness is so helpful to understand, and that's why I shared the Dakota pastels. They have a chart on the density of the pastel, because things like Unison and Mount Vision have a kind of medium soft density. They're not as creamy, and things like Schminke and Sennelier are very, very soft. Even Terry Ludwig is extra soft, but it's not as mushy as the Schminke and the Sennelier. So they have that impasto creaminess. It's really beautiful. It's really wonderful for those late stage marks, but it can be dangerous early on if you overuse it, because you can get oversaturation of pigment, right? Like it could overwhelm. That's why even these days, we love our Rembrandts, because they give us that nice thin layer first. But I gotta tell you, as a painterly advocate, I do so very much love that extra creamy, the Schminke, all the good stuff that really sits juicy on the surface. And I think Diane Townsend, her soft form, are another ones. They're really juicy and creamy. They kind of crumble sometimes because they're so soft. Okay, so good stuff. Let's keep moving as I pick up on Loriana. Hi, Loriana. How do you store them between glassine, in what, with or without fixative? And then on the Lascaux fixative, I did exactly as I thought you said, Alain, spraying over it and repeating it in a few minutes. I waited a day and I did it again. I'm still picking up pastel on my fingers if I touch the painting. It's on UArt Sanded 400. What am I doing wrong? Thank you. Loving all the learning, and your energy helps push me past my fear. Awesome. Love that, Loriana. Okay. First things first, I just want to say that fixatives for pastels will never be a varnish. They will never be utterly hard. There are many people trying to do many things out there to create like a varnish. And at the company SpectraFix, they are creating something that, this is not that something, but SpectraFix has a product right now that they call liquid glass or something. Its intention is to actually create like a crystallized varnish, so you don't need glass. It will change your artwork, but it's a really fascinating thing. So that's something you can experiment with. You can go to SpectraFix and find it, but this is their workable fixative, the Degas. So I just want to say, like, no matter what you're using, whether you're using Lascaux, which I recommend for that final set, or you're using Degas for a workable and you're kind of building things up, I really like using a blow dryer after I use the Degas, because it's casein or milk based. So it actually dries it really quick, so it doesn't do anything funny, and it stays closer to the main color, to regular colors, but it really is a workable fixative, not a final fixative. There is no fixative that's going to keep the pastel from not being sensitive to your touch. So Loriana, you're not doing anything wrong. The purpose of this is not to create a final varnish. It's to create protection from the pigment falling. So if you go in and you rub it, it is still rubbable. You'll still get pastel on your hands, but it is creating additional adhesion and security. If you're gonna ship that art, if you're gonna frame that art and you're worried about dust, it is definitely gonna help, okay? Consider it an added layer of security. That's the best way to think of it, okay? You're still gonna need that glass or glazing, that acrylic or glass over the painting. Unless you go play with the wild and new SpectraFix product that you can go check out, but it's kind of like you're putting, it will definitely darken your painting. And I think it's an interesting experiment that I don't even understand yet. So it's brand new, like over the last year, okay? Gladys, hey Gladys. I have searched all over the internet for acid-free adhesive foam, and I'm trying to find something really quick. And, hold on. I've been unable to find foam board backing being both acid-free and having adhesive. Would you be able to tell us some acid-free and having adhesive? Would you be able to tell us some brand names for this product? Thank you very much, Alan, for all your great teaching, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so, oh man, you know what? I might be able to do this, but let me just see what happens, because look, here's the deal. There's a company named Crescent that makes foam board. They have an acid-free foam board. You can call any framer and say, I need acid-free foam core, and they have acid-free foam core. Crescent, C-R-E-S-C-E-N-T, Crescent is definitely an acid-free brand. Now, there's definitely others, and like you should be able to go to various sites and find what you're looking for. So, I was just gonna try to see if I can figure this out for a sec. Hold on. What did I do? There it is. Okay, so I'm just bringing up that screen I had before, and then if I come over here. Okay, I've been looking at this company, Art Graphics. It's a company out of the Northeast, out of Connecticut, and they have the replacement product for the 3M positionable adhesive that I've been recommending. There's a link to it, but you can see that says acid-free foam board white, 32 by 40. So you might be able to call them up at Art Graphics and find out if they will put, because they sell they sell all kinds of things, as you can see, but they will have like peel and stick foam board that you can order, and other companies do as well. But you want to find out if it's acid-free, and if you called them, I'm sure you could find out. Or you could just buy the foam board and buy that other stuff. But if you don't want to be bothered, then you can just, if you don't want to be bothered means if you want to you don't want to have to put the adhesive onto the foam board, you can buy it peel and stick versions. And I know Crescent has a peel and stick product. The best way to find these things out actually is to call up your local framing company and say, hey, you know, I need some I need some acid-free foam board, and do they make a peel and stick version where there's adhesive on it? These guys have been dealing with it for years, so they always have access to things, and then you can find out what it is and maybe go order it on your own, or have them help you grab a sheet or two, right? That can be really effective. I always find that's a great way to get a product that you need. Especially if you need gator board, but you don't want to buy tons of it. You can buy like a sheet of gator board from your local frame supply company. And you can become you can get an account with some of these companies and they'll ship to you. Okay, so Loriana, I never answered the how do you store your art, and glassine, you know, this is glassine, right? It's that slippery looking waxy paper, and you always want to put the waxy side against the pastel so that it doesn't stick to the pastel, okay? So that's glassine, and then you can stack them. And then this is a clear bag, and I buy sets of these clear bags. These are 9x12s. I buy different sizes to fit different stuff. And clear bags are great. You can throw your art right into them. And then you can, you know, it's doing the same thing glassine does, which is keeping a protective, slippery layer over it, but it does it in a see-through manner so you can take your work and show it off, okay? So that's how I would be storing them. And once they have clear bag or glassine, you can stack them and you don't have to worry about, you know, rubbing the pastel. Awesome. Gladys, we answered your question. Yay. Denise, forgive me if this was asked before. I ordered and received a packet of glassine paper, but was not sure which side should be placed against the painting. There is a glossy side and a non-glossy side, so I wasn't sure. Thank you. Yeah, so I would put the glossy side of the glassine against the pastel because you want that slippery, waxy side that will not stick to your pastels, okay? That's what I would do. Awesome. Glad you're having fun with the course too, Denise. That's great. Sarah has a question. Hi, Sarah. Do you always do your sketches standing up at the easel? Or is that just for the sake of the demo? I'd love to hear your reasoning for whatever you do, even if it's a combination of sitting and standing, and what the pros and cons are for each approach. I know it's a personal preference, but if there's a particular yielded outcome of one approach versus the other, I'd really like to know what those are in your experience. Okay. Okay, you have a follow-up question, but it's different. So Sarah, I love to sketch standing up. The biggest advantage, the pro, is this. Watch, I'm standing so I can easily move in and out, right? So I can step back and squint, step back and squint. Now, of course, if I'm working small with a thumbnail, right, I don't really need to step back much in order to see it all small. So you absolutely can work sitting, doing thumbnails, and occasionally I will, but I am a stander. I just love to stand. I love to work upright at the easel with that arm stretched out, and I'm working. Even when I'm doing those thumbnails, I like that distance from the subject so that I can create the design of the shapes, the values, and of course here I'm using the hard pastels to establish those value shapes. But for me, that is best. I really love to work at the easel, and so I constantly make thumbnails standing. Now, there are circumstances where I might be sitting somewhere looking at something and doing some little sketches, and that's great too. So I don't think that there's a negative to sitting while you thumbnail because they are intended to be small. It's the physicality of how I like to work. I like to work standing. It's just how I am as a painter. Sarah, you said, I also noticed that you mixed your approach in terms of which pencil or charcoal to start with and using pastels or Tombow markers for the values. How does using a different set of tools impact the design and composition, or does it? In my mind, if I use different tools for each thumbnail, it will confuse my ability to clearly isolate the compositional aspects of the design. And instead, I might be drawn to the version with marker versus pastel, but then overlook something about the pastel version that is compositionally stronger. Do you normally make thumbnails of the same scene with different tools? Or again, is that just for the demo to give us an example of approaching it with different tools? Great questions. You are an analytical thinker, Sarah, and I appreciate that. You want to know where the pros and cons are, what the benefits are of working in specific ways. And so, let me start at the ending and then we'll go back from there. My favorite way to thumbnail is with Tombow markers. I do it the most often. And that's after years and years of thumbnailing, okay? So I go through evolutions and I go through little fads and phases where I like to work in different ways. Don't we all, right? We get excited about certain things. I love my Tombow brush pens as a marker thumbnail tool because of their graphic nature and their value shades. And then I've come to love the Posca paint pen. It is a fantastic white paint pen. I really, really enjoy it. So those are my faves. Now, this is done in hard pastel. Obviously, you can see how nice and striking it is from a design standpoint. The values are strong. I will tell you that what I do least is use charcoal for thumbnailing. And the reason I use charcoal least is because it's so soft and it creates these very soft transitions. And it's a wonderful, so where I love charcoal and where I use charcoal in the drawing process is in larger monochrome studies. So if I really want to study something and take longer, if I want to take 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, and really study something, I'll use charcoal because it's so subtle and it has beautiful for edges, and it's a wonderful way to begin to build up a drawing. I especially like it on pastel mat. So there are definite benefits of different techniques that you'll get, right? So if I'm using hard pastels like this, it is possible for me to play with sculptural mark making even with the little hard pastel. So I can start thinking about the edge transitions and mark making. However, I don't really need to be thinking about that a lot in the thumbnail, so I can save that for later. The markers I think are more graphic, which I really like. And I think from there, like, you know, design is design. We don't ever want to, so sometimes I'm actually doing a thumbnail. I might be doing this thumbnail to understand the values. And then I might do another one to really simplify the shapes because my brain just wants to focus on that intention. So think of it that way, that you can explore, but I would say that use the materials that you feel comfortable with and you enjoy and that makes sense to you to get simplified values and to really clarify design. Yes, I did different materials during the demos to show you different materials, definitely, in that case. But I don't stand demonstrating because I want you to see it with the camera well. I stand because that's how I paint, okay? And I pretty much do that all the time. Okay, I hope that makes sense. I wanted you to know what I love the most. I love the markers, I love the Posca paint pen, but I do enjoy little hard pastel studies. They're really cool. Okay, and the charcoal, really, I don't thumbnail at all with it anymore. I save charcoal for monochrome studies, so taking longer to do a drawing where I'm understanding. I typically do that more with animals, people, figurative, things that have more rendering and more kind of, you know, nailing it down and being correct with it is when I do that. Julie, hi Julie. And what do you guys, what's your favorite? Let each other know. Let's know what, you know, do you have a favorite thumbnailing tool and paper? And I'm a big fan of these toned tan and toned gray papers, but you know, white is wonderful with markers as well, isn't it? So I'd love to know. Okay, Julie, here we go. In milestone 4, as you are working on the analogous color study, you mentioned that you look more at your thumbnail rather than the reference photo since you had already figured out any compositional changes decisions. In that case, that you typically reference your thumbnail rather than the reference photo, is that the case? Okay. Or do you keep referring to both the thumbnail and the reference photo? Okay, is that the case? So Julie, when I'm doing a color study and when the thumbnail has altered the design of the reference, I like to look at that thumbnail to stay honest to the design. Also, when I am changing the colors, the local colors, when I am leaving local color and I'm doing the same value but different colors, I want to look at that value study and base what I'm doing off that and take a leap with the color. Because if I keep looking at the reference and the specific colors that the reference is giving me, it's harder for me to make that color leap. So that's another, you know, you can also neutralize your reference photo in circumstances where you really want to go somewhere different with the colors and the colors in the reference are getting in your way. They're tripping you up. But I actually love having that color reference available to refer to and see where's the light doing what, and where's it cooling, and where's it neutralizing, and what's happening with intensity. So it is a both and for me. Like I definitely will look at my thumbnail for design and for value, and for shape, but I will also peek at that reference and kind of refer to things, observation-based elements that are helping me discern what I need for the painting, for sure. So it's definitely a both and, but the key is that you learn how to identify clear, simplified value shapes and that you know how to see those value masses so that you can leave local colors, so that you can make your own interpretations, your own expressions. That is not hard for me anymore. That is something I delight in. I don't even think about it. I go to places with color before I even know, because this is what I do. I really enjoy that after years and years of that process, okay? And you can get there too, but it's like training your muscles, your mental muscles to do that. Great. Marilyn, hi Marilyn. Do you try out your colors beforehand, even when doing a color study? I often find surprises when I use a color, even one I think I know, especially if changing papers or colors of a brand. Is that something you learn to do instinctively over time? Great question. And so do I try? So really when it comes to a color study, Marilyn, I don't try out colors before my color study. The color study is my trial run. It is my risk-free playground. So yeah, I'm looking to try them out in that color study, and that's the trial run. And yeah, that's the point, right? Because as you use some of those colors, you find surprises. You're like, whoa. So you can always, you can have a little test, like a little test scrap next to your color study where you can test out a color just to see what happens, because it might surprise you, right? That definitely does happen where colors will surprise you. So a little test scrap is the way to solve that. And the other thing I wanted to say is like changing papers. So you may find with a color study, like you use one surface, a dark surface, and then you do a color study on a light surface. Well, that palette of color is going to look very, very different because of the law of simultaneous contrast when using a dark surface than when you use a lighter surface. So you do, I think it is wise to test the colors on a surface. So keep the surface the same and try a couple of different things. If you try something and you realize, wow, I really don't like this surface, then of course you'll change, but you're gonna have to be aware that your colors are gonna respond differently to a different value and a different color intensity, right? And that happens every time that we do a color study in a different manner. We change that underpainting tone. I hope that helped, Marilyn, I really do. Over time, you do gain some understanding and instinct with the material, but I still need to come up with a color strategy. That doesn't go away. I definitely have an archive of ideas, but I still need to show up to that easel. Nobody gets a free pass. We all need to kind of come up with a color strategy, okay? So, Kathy. Hey, Kathy. Okay. This one is a milestone 4. Here we go. I'm not clear about what values can go over what other values. So this is like when you're using the sticks, right? What values can go over other values. So for example, I did a complementary study on the sugar palm trees. It seemed impossible to put the darks down first and then to try to bring the lighter values like the sky or the grass up to the dark value without bumping into it, which would create a mess. Partly because they were complementary colors. Some of us are wondering if we could put in the lights of the sky first and then put darker trees on top. So basically, when is it okay to put one color or value on top of another? What won't work and what works the best? This is the issue. I'm hoping that I'm being clear. Okay, definitely, Kathy, it makes sense to me. And you know, in speaking to Kathy, she comes from colored pencil, where you can totally like layer because of their, you know, that's a grease-based and they layer and they're more controlled in the process, where with soft pastel, especially any kind of extra soft pastel, there's just so much more pigment that is being introduced, right? And so what I'd like to say is what over what? Well, the first thing I want to say is more of a context. Like I want us to think about thin pigment versus thick pigment. Oil painters say, I'm going to work fat over lean. I'm going to start thin application. I'm going to use more solvent. I'm going to thin it out. Now that we're doing underpainting, I'm hoping that that makes sense to you, Kathy, as well as others, that you can thin the pigment and you can wash it in and you can stain it into the surface. And it's a very lean process. It's very thin. You're not using up a lot of tooth. Sometimes if you have a thick application of your pastels when you wash, you can still use up tooth. But if you're doing it right, you're thinning it out, you're staining the surface, and you have lots of tooth. It's very lean. So later stages, you work thicker with more of a heavy-handed application. So whether you're using light or dark, if you're using too much pigment at first, you're gonna have problems working different values into each other, whether it's the dark into the light or whether it's the light into the dark. So the first thing to always think about with soft pastel and with pastels in general is fat over lean. So think this way, harder pastels are thinner. They're gonna apply less pigment. So if I'm having problems with getting the mess, the mush, use harder pastels first or medium pastels first, or do an underpainting wash first. Do ways to get something thin down to establish your value masses. Now, I'm a darks first, lights later guy. I anchor my dark value masses, and then I add lights later. That doesn't mean I put all big thick darks under the lights area. That definitely doesn't mean that. It means that I look for the areas where I have dark value masses, like in the trees, right? These are dark value masses. And this shadow is a dark value. And of course, this is a very busy scene, right? Where we have little lights and darks flickering back and forth. So what am I gonna do? How do I keep these lights away from those darks? Well, I wash those darks in. So the darks are underneath and they're thinly applied and they're stained. And then I can apply that lighter value blue right on top of the dark, crisp as can be, no mush, no mess. Those whites, the violet and the turquoise and the light cream are starting to mush into each other. Those are fat, extra soft application, more impasto, more mushy and creamy in a good way, because once I've established the masses, I can build up my lights and get some mushy mess in a good way. I like to have some thick application in those areas. But yeah, so essentially what I'm saying to you is, if you were to put your sky in first, you have to put it in very, very thin and very faded in order to put darks over it. You'll have the same problem when you put darks over lights as you would have if you tried to put lights over darks. They've just gotta be, that's what I love about the underpainting. But even if you rubbed something in thinly, you would be able to work over it. And certainly, if you've got a softer pastel, it will apply over a harder one, okay? But when you've begun to fill the tooth, that's where danger zone happens and you get the mushy, messy thing, okay? So I think in general, if you've been used to working in watercolor, you've been used to working in colored pencil, you're dealing with a very different, the medium itself of pastel, especially soft pastel, is more sculptural and is more like modeling clay. It's a little bit mushier. As we embrace that, we learn how to manage that, it is a beautiful, beautiful impressionistic quality that could never be achieved in some of the other mediums. So it really is lovely. So I hope that makes sense. So I definitely still advocate establishing your dark value masses early so that you have contrast, and then when you bring those lights in, otherwise you can be overly lighting your scene and you're struggling to have dark values anchored, okay? That's my little take on that. I hope it helps for all of us. Appreciate the questions. Trudy, hey Trudy, I see that on our underpainting handout that you mentioned it in your video that for the local color, that's this one, mineral spirits can be used to extend the drying time to work wet into wet. I wonder if that only applies to the use of pastel underpainting. I'm interested in trying the watercolor underpainting method, as this isn't anything I've done before. I do understand that pastel then becomes an accent. Okay, so if you're using alcohol, 70% or 90% alcohol, it dries fast. 90% alcohol dries very fast. Water dries slowly. Mineral spirit, odorless mineral spirits dry slower, but I think water probably dries the slowest. You can always use a blow dryer if you're inside of your home or studio to speed up that drying time. But yeah, I would say both watercolor or the mineral spirit are gonna be slower drying time approaches to the underpainting wash, okay? I'm watching you putting the orange complementary underpainting in on the video and wondered if you select a single colored underpainting rather than a colored pastel paper. If there were a bright orange one, for instance, sometimes, but not in other times. Are these single color underpaintings very different from using colored sanded paper? So the big difference, Trudy, I mean, great observation. You could use an orange paper if you had one, but if you had to run out to the store every time you wanted to make a complementary of your scene, you would be hard pressed to find all the unique colors that you would need. However, you may get lucky once in a while where you have something that works really well as a complement. Take advantage of that. Now, the beauty of the complementary wash is in, first of all, any color that you have in stick form can be washed and stained. Second of all, you can create aqueous or transparent effects with your pastels underneath your painting. You can't do that in a piece of toned paper. The sort of washy quality that you can create is beautiful in itself. and you may see some running or some transparency or some brushy textures that are really beautiful, okay? And just frankly, like some of the really chromatic reds or oranges or magentas or pinks or violets that you might want to use as a complementary underpainting, they don't usually sell those colors with all the papers, okay? So if you have it, awesome, wonderful, take advantage of that. But this is really exciting that like you can create with one of your white, or UArt is like off-white, one of those colored papers, you can make any kind of surface that you like. It's really, really thrilling, okay? Okay, where am I? One more question regarding method 4 of underpainting. If one is using watercolor as the underpainting with pastels as the accent, would one use a good watercolor paper or an appropriate sanded pastel paper that accepts water? Thank you. The number one surface for watercolor underpainting that I know of is Lux Archival. It's just very, very beautiful for watercolor underpaintings. And some pastel artists who like to use alcohol really prefer the Lux Archival as well. So it's a 100% rag, really lovely paper. I really like UArt. I think it's wonderful. I think Lux is another great paper. So it's nice to know we have those options. I would encourage you to try that. If you use just watercolor paper, when you use your pastels, whatever that texture of that paper is, the pastels are gonna pick up. So if it's a rough cold press watercolor, that cold press texture is gonna get picked up by the pastels. So what's nice about the coated papers is that you can really make marks with the pastel without sort of the paper's texture becoming the dominant story, okay? So great question. I would try Lux Archival. Linda, hey Linda. So far, I've been following these exercises with UArt Premium Sanded Pastel Paper in the natural, which has taken the undercoatings well. I'm wondering how or if you use toned papers. I have a packet of slate pastel paper. Slate would be like a really dark gray. Would we still use the wet undercoating application, and how does it affect the color applications? Okay, glad you're having fun, Linda, awesome. So when I'm using anything like dark gray or black or the UArt dark or anthracite pastel matte, I don't do any washing. The dark surfaces are very dramatic and they are wonderful surfaces to allow the marks of your pastels to be the exciting statement. When you get into the lighter tones, tans or lighter things, they will take a wash still, and that could be interesting. You just always have to keep in mind what the color of the tone is that you're interacting with, because you're not going to get the same kind of contrast in your wash, and colors are going to look different based upon the tone that is underneath them. So for me, if I'm using a toned surface, any kind of toned pastel matte or toned Lacarte, I don't wash. When I wash, I use UArt or Lux or the white pastel matte, something like that, where I can really see the wash, okay? So I want the colors that I'm using as wash to be the story of that wash. Now, there are some who enjoy washing on midtones and darker. It's not something for me that I like to take advantage of, okay? I hope that made sense, especially slate. Like, I wouldn't wash on slate personally. I think it looks awesome when you just make your marks on that dark surface. Kirk, hey Kirk, I'm learning many great techniques for landscape painting. However, I struggle a bit with underpaintings. When I use alcohol with pastels to complete an underpainting, I find that my underpainting tends to be comprised of two values: very dark regions and a light wash elsewhere. What should I do to create underpaintings using alcohol and pastels with 4 or 5 values? Thanks for any guidance. Kirk, I think that the things that are probably happening with you are how much solvent you're using and the chroma. So like the really dark values, the fact that you're getting really dark values probably means you're washing with a dark value stick. And that's showing up. So then if you have really light, faint values, usually that happens because we use a lot of solvent and we really tint down the color until it's just a faint variation of it. So I would say really learning how to manage with the use of a paper towel and your brush, the amount of solvent. So use less solvent. Now, if it's dragging dry brush, you're gonna need more solvent. But if you're using a lot of solvent, it will fade the pigment more. And then I would say, using more chromatic colors. So those mid-value chroma, the more intense chroma, that's gonna push a lot of pigment, a lot of color into your wash. The only way that you're gonna take something that's mid-value and make it really light is using tons of solvent. The only way you're gonna take something mid-value and make it really dark is by mushing it in with the dark. So you also have to keep your brush clean. Keep your brush clean so that you can manage the amount of that. When you're going from a darker area and then you're gonna do a lighter zone in your painting, you've gotta make sure you're not putting all the dark values into the light zone, okay? So it's about managing your brush, the amount of solvent, and then making sure that you've got those clean chromatic colors, and not overwhelming them with solvent or mixing them in with the darks so it gets muddy, okay? Those are my encouragements to you, Kirk. It just takes a little while to get the feel and to get more successful with it. So maybe off of the painting, just make some little swatches with solvent, with alcohol, and with colors, and create some gradations from light to medium value, from medium value to dark, so that you learn the way it feels to do that without having like a whole scene to paint, foliage and rivers and shadows and lights. That can be overwhelming, okay? So like just make some swatches and gradations on a sheet of paper to get more versed in using the solvent, using the pigments, and washing, okay? Gene, last question from Gene. Who was supportive of your art while you were developing your pastel style? Great question, Gene. Who was supportive of my art while I was developing my pastel style? Well, I can certainly shout out my wife. She was my biggest, what would you call it? The best eye, someone you really rely upon to be an eye in the studio to kind of help you see how you're doing and the results of what you're doing, a critical eye in the best sense of the word. I really leaned in that way. I would also say that certain mentors, I sought out artistic mentors who were illustrators, who were fine art painters, and they were in my area. I met with them for figure drawing and painting classes and portrait painting. We would meet to paint the portrait from life on a Thursday night or paint on Monday nights at one gentleman's studio. We had figure sessions when I was a young artist developing, and they were a great encouragement in being around working professional artists. I would also say pastel societies, so developing friendships with pastel societies where, like, honestly, you're getting to know other pastel artists. We are there to encourage one another. It really is very powerful. And so I was a member as a young artist of the Connecticut Pastel Society and built a lot of relationships in that society. Lots of encouraging relationships where there were artists who were saying, keep doing that. Wow, that's really exciting. More of that. And another source, I would say, as a professional working artist who was trying to sell my work, was clients and collectors. So actually, I thought I needed to do more and more oil paintings to become a successful artist. And what I discovered through the collectors was they loved my pastels very much. So like I did tons of portraits of children, and they actually preferred my pastel portraits. And so I got a lot of encouragement to do those because they wanted to hire me for them. Even a couple of the galleries I worked with within my area were excited about what I was doing with the pastels. There were other galleries you couldn't get into because of the pastels way back when. It's a much more agreeable environment today in galleries for pastel artists. There's a real appreciation for the medium now, which is delightful. So those are some of the sources of encouragement and support that I have had as I was developing my style. But the best thing you can do is to continue exploring and trusting that inner sense, that inner knowing that you are moving towards something, and just keep following your curiosity, exploring the thing that you're fascinating with, that you just can't get enough of, and keep working on it. And your style will bubble right up to the surface as you're exploring your curiosity. I'm telling you, that is so true. Okay? Hope everybody's doing great. Glad that you're all having fun there in the chat. Deb says, these Q&A sessions are so helpful. So many great questions and answers. And I love it. I love it. That's good news. Friends, milestone 6 opens tomorrow. Now get ready, get a good night's sleep, or before you go into milestone 6, whether it's tomorrow or it's a week from now. There's a lot of excitement in there. I will say, we really tried to pace this experience so that we build concepts on top of each other. And milestone 6 is where things all start to fit together, and we see the roadmap. And there's a lot of demonstrations and there's a lot of bonus content inside of it. I'm excited for you. Take your time, go at your pace. Don't be overwhelmed. Don't rush through it. Really just sit with it and enjoy that process, okay? That's why we brought you from thumbnail into color study, from color study into underpainting, so you could build the concepts and one on top of another and stack your learning and stack your growth, okay? So now you get to see how that fits in the roadmap, which is really exciting. We will email you letting you know that milestone 6 is open and waiting for you. Beyond that, keep going, my friends. You're never behind here. So if you show up in the Facebook community and you're posting your sphere, we're super excited about that. We want to see your sphere. We want to encourage you. If you're working on organizing your pastels, we would love to see your pastels. We want to encourage you. We want to see those pastels, give you some answers to questions if you have them. It is such a delight to be together. Thank you for being with me for this wonderful time. Until next time, keep showing up at the easel for your creative dreams. Take care.